How to prep for the coming crisis. Whether you think we're heading for civil riots, world war, the zombie apocalypse, or AI killer robots, here are 6 tips to prepare you for the coming hard times. Tip number 1, have a plan B. This is billionaire Peter Thiel. He was a co-founder of PayPal with Elon Musk. He just listed his latest company, Palantir, on the New York Stock Exchange for $16 billion. Now that's his plan A. Plan B is exiting and heading for New Zealand. That's because Peter read this book, The Sovereign Individual, which is all about how to survive and thrive during the collapse of the welfare state. The book is written by James Dale Davidson and Lord William Rees Mogg, and it predicts the rise of the digital revolution, the end of the nation state, and a civil uprising which would be against the resulting digital elites. It also explained why New Zealand was one of the best places to escape to. So it inspired him back in the 1990s to launch PayPal, to become Facebook's first investor, and while he was becoming a digital elite, to also become a citizen of New Zealand. That's where he's bought a 477-acre sheep station, and it's led to his tech billionaire friends creating their own escape plans, leading to these kind of headlines. Why Silicon Valley billionaires are preparing for the apocalypse in New Zealand, and doomsday prep for the super rich. Reid Hoffman, another of the PayPal mafia who went on to found LinkedIn, estimates 50% of all the billionaire friends he has have got a plan B. He says, saying you're buying a house in New Zealand is kind of a wink wink, say no more. And no, you don't have to be either a billionaire or go to New Zealand to follow what Peter did. Just start where he started and read The Sovereign Individual to get a good idea of what's coming next. Tip number 2 is buy a bunker. Another book that just came out this summer is Bunker, Building for the End Times. It's written by Bradley Garrett and explains exactly how what was a fringe activity has now become the mainstream. There's Survival Condo in Kansas, where you can buy a luxury condo in a repurposed missile silo for $1.5 million. Or Vivos X Point, the former US Army base in South Dakota, 3/4 the size of Manhattan, where you can buy your bunker for $35,000. Or you can choose your own bunker from the list on the prepping guide with your very own Bombnado or nuclear survival shelter. In fact, there's no shortage of bunker options. So what's the reason for this? It's because prepping is no longer a fringe activity. Because the way I see it, that when the whole world is on the edge, then what was the fringe becomes the center. As this Fast Company headline from this August says, bunkers aren't just for preppers anymore. Building a bunker and preparing for the end times has never seemed more relevant. And here's Bradley Garrett's prediction. I expect a quarter of the US to be prepping on some level by the end of the year. And that's actually backed up by a YouGov survey which was conducted in March this year, which found 19% of Americans believe a global pandemic or climate change will lead to an apocalypse. And keep in mind, that was just before COVID really took off. Tip number 3, move to bunker country. So I've got my own home bomb shelter. And why? Because I have a home in Singapore. Since 1997, all homes in Singapore that are built have got to, by law, have their own bomb shelter. And that's led to an entire Singaporean subculture of people who are pimping out their bunkers. Switzerland has a similar law where every single household has got to have access to a nuclear bomb shelter or have one built in. And that's been a law since 1963. Sweden, Finland, South Korea, and Israel all have bunkers for the majority of their population. China has an entire bomb-proof underground city under their capital city, Beijing, where over 1 million people live today. It was built after Chairman Mao said, dig deep tunnels, store food, and prepare for war. So if you've been secretly wondering whether preparing for the worst somehow makes you an outlier or a conspiracy theorist, you're getting to see here that entire countries have been preparing for the worst. Which brings us on to number 4. Tip number 4, assess the risks. Okay, so here's a question. Do you have car insurance? There's a good chance you got it not because you wanted to crash your car, but not only was it a legal requirement, it actually gives you peace of mind. So what do you think is more likely, a car crash or a global catastrophe? The odds of dying from a car crash are 1 in 77. That's a 1.3% chance, the same odds as dying from a gunshot wound. You're double as likely to die from alcohol or drugs, and you're 15 times more likely to die from heart disease. As for Armageddon, this year, Toby from the Future of Humanity Institute at Oxford University came out with this book, The Precipice, Existential Risk and the Future of Humanity. It shows we are at a higher risk of extinction than at any time in our history. And Ord calculates that there is a 1 in 6 chance that humanity suffers an existential catastrophe in the coming century. That's a 1 in 6 chance of death by doomsday versus 1 in 77 of death by driving. This is backed up by this article in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, How Likely is an Existential Catastrophe, which says the average American is at least 1,500 times more likely to die in a human extinction catastrophe than in a plane crash. So spending a bit of time on insuring against an apocalypse isn't such a crazy idea. So tip number 5, do the basics. Having a plan B and a bunker is like the new normal today. And then there's extremes on either side. At the top extreme is Bill Gates, helping to fund the doomsday seed vault that houses every known crop seed in the world under the Arctic, so we can replant food if everything gets wiped out. And then there's Elon Musk, who shot his Tesla into space without mentioning it had a full backup for humanity in the trunk. Whatever happens to us, that Tesla and a backup of who we were will remain in orbit around the sun until it burns out. Now, these are extremes which are like humanity level actions. And then at the other extreme are those who do nothing. That's like driving a car with no lessons, no license, and no insurance. So choose where on the spectrum you want to be. I'd recommend you do at least the bare minimum. So if you don't have a bunker, at least have a bag. Preppers call it a bug out bag. That's a bag with at least 3-day supplies, which you can just grab and head out the door with. Or the inch bag, which lasts a lot longer. And that's because inch stands for I'm not coming home. So why is having a bag helpful? Because if you have any anxiety about things getting worse, just knowing you have a plan and a bag to grab gives you peace of mind. And don't think you're weird doing this. There's entire sites dedicating to helping you fill out your bag. Amazon has an entire catalog of bug out bags that you can choose from, including ones that are already pre-packed with supplies. And even the US government is giving you a guide online on how you go about kitting out your survival bag. Which brings us on to the final tip, tip 6, sleep well at night. That's the whole point of prepping, which is the ability to sleep well. In January this year, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists announced the doomsday clock is now just 100 seconds to midnight. And they said, our species has never before in its 200,000 year history been so close to a disaster as we are this century. The bulletin was set up by the scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project and built the first atomic bomb. Albert Einstein was one of the first sponsors, and Robert Oppenheimer was its first chair. They set it up to keep reminding us and governments at how much we were actually moving ourselves towards our own doomsday. Every year since 1947, they have announced how close we are to the midnight of the doomsday clock, where midnight is mass extinction. And in the last decade, we have been moving closer every single year. In 2018, for the first time, we moved to 2 minutes before midnight, and this year, we moved to 100 seconds. This is not coming from some crazy alarmist doomsayers, but from the world's top scientists, including 14 Nobel Prize winners. So how can we live in such a world of uncertainty with any level of sanity? I think the answer lies in the realization that many of the people already mentioned in this video got just through the process they took of prepping. By thinking about what you would do in a global collapse and what things might look like after, you actually realize that we have the possibility of creating something that could be even better than what we have today. Our broken economy could lead to a better economy. A collapse of society might lead to a fairer society. Every year recently, I've gone with my family to Burning Man in the Nevada desert. Every year when we've gone with our survival bags, our tents, our RVs. And while many who have never been think it's just one big party for a week in the desert, the reality is it's a place where we get to recreate society from scratch. Living with 10 Burning Man principles, including radical inclusion, communal effort, civic responsibility, and radical self-reliance. No laws, no rules, just a place to rethink and restore hope for humanity. And when you come to terms that what we could lose today isn't perfect, and we have everything we need to start again, the fear actually disappears, and we can live in the present and be grateful for what we have today. In Bradley Garrett's book, Bunker, Milton Torres, who was the first to move permanently into the X point, said, after the reset, we won't even need laws, just the respect we have for each other. I can't wait for that. This book, Rohan Nation, Reinventing America After the 2020 Collapse, believe it or not, was written a decade ago by Dr. Drew Miller. He was a colonel in the US Air Force, a senior executive in the Pentagon, and a Harvard professor. And after seeing firsthand the dangers that were facing us, he decided to not just write that book, but for his own peace of mind, to set up Fortitude Ranch. Today, Fortitude Ranch has 12 different ranches across the US that are both holiday camps as well as survival camps when they're needed. He says having a plan isn't about worrying about tomorrow, but being able to sleep well today. And in his book, he gives his slogan, prepare for the worst, enjoy the present. I hope you do the same and that you found this video helpful. If you have, please do give it a like. I'll leave a link to the books I mentioned down below, and please do give a comment on any links or thoughts you have as well. And do make sure you subscribe for thoughts and tips as we head into this uncertain future. And as always, thanks so much for watching.